What are the Denver Broncos' biggest draft needs after the first week of NFL free agency? And could they be done looking at the quarterback position for the year? We'll take a look at that and much more in today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.
You are Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos Country? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos Country, all the everydayers out there, for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day every single day for all your Broncos news, content, coverage, and more. You can get this podcast for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So if you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe or that follow button down below so you never miss out on what's going on with your favorite team in the build-up through the rest of NFL free agency and the build-up to the NFL draft. This is the place to be. I'm Cody Roark. I cover the Broncos for Mile High Sports as a reporter, joined alongside, as always, by Sayre Bedinger. He's the site expert over there, predominantly orange.com. Sayre, my friend, free agency, really the most important part, the meat and bones, already kind of over with at this point. Everything else that we're going to see happen, maybe from a roster personnel standpoint, there are going to be little sprinkle moves, little additive depth moves that come and go. I don't think there's going to be any really big moves here for the Broncos going forward. So now that allows us to shift our sights here after the whole wave of free agency. What are the Broncos' plans and what are the Broncos' biggest needs going into the NFL draft? I'd be remiss if we don't start off with probably the biggest position that is under question right now for the team, and that is QB.
Yeah, who doesn't love some good low-hanging fruit, right, Cody? I mean, this is obviously the biggest need on the Denver Broncos, or at least the biggest position that I think really needs to be addressed as far as giving this. We see the direction of the team, right? We see the team going younger. We see them making roster moves that are maybe unpopular in the eyes of many, but they're loading up on cap space for 2025, as you and I had an episode about recently as well. And look, Cody, I mean, the quarterback situation is one that it could drastically change the perception of this team for the entirety of the 2024 season. Like, if the Broncos go after a first-round quarterback in 2024, it's not that people won't care about losing, but it will at least give us a sense of, hey, we can at least have some fun while we're potentially losing some games. Like, we may win some games we're not supposed to. We may lose some tough ones as well, but winning or losing, it kind of pales in comparison by, hey, we want to see this rookie quarterback developing. We want to know that this guy could be the future of the franchise. And if you can get something like that, if you can show that progression, if you can get a rookie quarterback to come in and be the guy and prove that he can be the guy, I think fans will be able to take wins, losses, whatever may happen. Fans will be able to take those pills how they come each week of the season. So getting this quarterback position, it's not just about getting excitement either, right? It's about getting an option that you could truly build around for the future.
And I think we also have to dive deep into some of the terminology that we are seeing in the buildup for the NFL draft, right? You hear it all the time. People talk about generational quarterback. Like, folks, the idea that there's a generational player really available is crazy to, thinking about, okay, this guy who had really good numbers at college is going to be a generational talent coming into the NFL. We talk about it so much. The environment, the pieces that you have around a player are so important. You can have a really great player at the position, right? But if you don't have pieces around him, it's very, very hard to really raise those cells, so to speak, or, raise the tide of your team. Now, I think at the same exact time, even if you draft a first round guy, the expectations are always going to be very high. And Sayre, I think you made some great points there when talking about that. I think I want to ask the question to Broncos Country here, right? If the Broncos drafted a first round quarterback, would you be more patient if the team was losing, or would it just further accelerate? Like, okay, they need to find the next option, because I feel like that's a lot of the conversation. I see commentary on teams who are going through quarterback carousels. Well, not necessarily the carousel as lengthy as the Denver Broncos, but more so teams that are trying to figure out who their quarterback is going to be. The fan base can change very, very instantly on that. So for me, is Broncos Country, are you okay with being patient for a young guy to struggle in his first couple of seasons? Or is it going to be like, all right, well, they got this guy, he didn't work out his rookie season, now we need to move on and find the next best option? To me, I feel like that is something that'll probably come up if the Broncos go QB in the draft and that young guy does go through struggles. But I think that you have to go through the struggles. Like, how long is it? I think a lot of people our age, Sayre, don't even remember Peyton Manning's rookie season and how bad it truly was from that standpoint. Imagine if the Colts gave up on him after his rookie season. So for me, I think you got to take your licks. But then again, you're asking Broncos country to be patient with the process, which, look, this has been a fan base that's been impatient for far too long because they've had promised, like they've had expectations raised to the roof. They've had quarterbacks come in and they've had like the hype about, okay, this guy's going to be good. This guy's going to help Denver turn it around. And they don't do that. I think we sometimes fall victim to the moment, but long term, I think patience is key, which asking people to be patient, I'm not a patient person myself. So asking people to be patient is a very, very hard thing here, especially when it comes to professional football and the quarterback position.
And I think context and situation is really everything, right? Because I think we could point to the Josh Allen dilemma back in
Yeah.
2018, where a lot of Broncos fans like to look in hindsight and say, well, the team should have definitely drafted Josh Allen back then. And there's the other segment of the fan base that's like, there's no way he would have lasted more than a year in Denver. The fans are so impatient. But remember, the context of that particular year was that the Broncos were barely, by the time they were at the Senior Bowl, Cody, they were less than 2 years removed from winning the Super Bowl, right? They won the Super Bowl in February of 2016. You're coaching the Senior Bowl in January of 2018. So you're less than 2 years removed from winning the Super Bowl. And there's this part of the fan base that's like, there's fragments of that Super Bowl winning team that you want to build around. You believe that you have at least some of those pieces to be able to still be a contender. So you don't have the patience for a Josh Allen to take his lumps for 2 or 3 seasons because you have those pieces from a team that just won the Super Bowl less than 2 years ago. That's the situation in 2018. That's vastly different from where we are in 2024 now, where, hey, we're almost a decade removed at this point. I mean, 8 years removed from
I got
winning the
gray
Super
hair.
Bowl. And yeah, look at this. I mean, I'm able to grow facial hair, Cody. This was not even the case 8 years ago. So, but look, the situation is completely different, and the fan base, I think, is ready to embrace a rebuild. Like you said, a lot of the prominent, not prominent, but a lot the new generation of Broncos fans, they may not even really remember Peyton Manning's heyday in Denver. I mean, we're talking about 10 plus years ago that he threw for 55 touchdowns in that 2013 season. A generation of Broncos fans that's in their 20s and teens right now. They were kids back when that happened, just like me when John Elway and Terrell Davis and Shannon Sharp. Like, it's a totally different era. And I think this fan base is ready to finally embrace. And it looks like the Broncos coaching staff and front office are as well, because they passed on everybody who's been available.
Yeah, and I think that's going to lead us into a bigger conversation here as we look at the Broncos' biggest needs when we talk about the NFL draft. But if they don't choose to go the NFL draft route, they may not make a move at all. What if the Broncos just roll with Jarrett Stidham in 2024? We're going to weigh the pros and cons of that here on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to you by our friends over there at the Game Time app. And if you've ever had an experience when you go to buy tickets to one of your favorite events that are coming up, or you forget last minute, oh my gosh, I forgot there's a concert in town I want to go, but you go on there, you try to find tickets, they're either too expensive or they're sold out. Game Time can help alleviate some of those concerns with their app here today, because you shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event with killer last minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. Game Time is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. You want to see what the vantage point is going to be from all the action of your favorite sporting event or even a concert. You can see that inside the Game Time app. It's a pretty cool feature there. I love it myself. All in prices would show you your total upfront, so you know that you're getting a great deal before you check out, and you can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
Are the Denver Broncos comfortable rolling with Jarrett Stidham as QB1 for the 2024 season? We're going to weigh that option and why that might be the most likely situation, Broncos fans, to see Stidham and his jersey number 4 out there week 1 of the 2024 season. Or is it first round or bust? Maybe the Broncos really are comfortable with Jarrett Stidham. We're getting those signals, and Cody and I are going to break down those signals on today's episode of Locked On Broncos. We want to say thank you to every single one of you that makes Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day, every single day, wherever, whenever, and however you choose to listen to podcasts, free and available always on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day, and jump over to YouTube as well. Turn on those notifications because Cody and I were going to be here to cover every single aspect of the Broncos offseason, even breaking news episodes where we typically do 5 episodes a week. But look, there may be some additional content that you get when you want to tune in every single day and you want to be subscribed, have that notification bell turned on. So, Cody, we talk about the Broncos quarterback position. Obviously, we're going to be talking about it all offseason, leading up to the draft, after the draft, leading up to the season. This is going to be the most intriguing aspect of this team because it does feel like the Broncos are going with a youth movement at the position. They've passed on most all of the available guys that could be bridge options or that could be perceived as kind of a 1-year, I guess, upgrade over Jarrett Stidham. But man, I wrote an article on Predominantly Orange that I talked about how Sean Payton, it seems like he's getting ready to put his money where his mouth is with Jarrett Stidham. I can't help but feel, Cody, like this team could be ready to roll with Stidham week 1 of 2024.
I mean, all signs seem to point to that. As you had mentioned, their stance on all the available quarterbacks that were there in this year's NFL free agency, there was quite a few, right? And guys that you talked about, potential upgrades, obviously maybe some stop gaps for them. Denver, really the only guy that had perceived interest in was Sam Darnold. And the moment that they found out that the Vikings were going to offer $10 million, they're like, all right, we're not interested in that anymore because of where Denver's at there from a financial standpoint. For me, it's like, okay, do you take the risk of maybe going out there and getting a guy who has to learn Sean Payton's system? Or is there a guy there in Jarrett Stidham who knows the system, who learned it all of last year, has been his nose firmly implanted inside the playbook the entire offseason, is more than likely going to be the guy that's going to get the first opportunity so far when the Broncos do step back onto the field, regardless of the situation? You have a guy who's got some chemistry with some of those guys already, and you need to build some chemistry, I think, with guys. I think the real big name that I think a guy like Jarrett has to build more chemistry with, I think it's going to be Courtland Sutton. We kind of saw a little bit of a disconnect. I know he didn't play in that one game against the Chargers because of the concussion, but then that game against the Raiders, they didn't have a great game, the connection between those two guys. As we saw Jarrett have a good connection with Jerry Jeudy. Jerry's no longer on the team. So what does this mean? It's an opportunity not only for a new guy to emerge here at wide receiver or Courtland to continue to take the mantle and take it a step further, but a guy like Jarrett Stidham already has the advantage of knowing the system, knowing what Sean wants. And I think the coaching staff is comfortable with that. And on top of that, I think we also forget Ben DiNucci's still on the roster. He signed a futures reserve contract. And for some reason, there's something in there for Sean Payton. Like, this goes back to rookie minicamp. I remember when the Broncos rookies took the field for the first time, going to that practice and seeing Ben DiNucci, who's just coming off of a terrific season in the XFL. Yeah, a guy who played football for a year straight and was in a building, in meeting rooms for a year straight. Denver, the vibe I'm getting right now is that Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci, that might be your 1-2 punch at the QB position, especially if Denver is going to do a rebuild for a year. I mean, I feel like that's where we're maybe leaning here. And I know the next biggest obstacle for us, Denver could still sign a free agent quarterback out there. Wouldn't be popular in my opinion. I feel like the draft is probably the next biggest domino, but that's still about a month and a half away here. So we're just going to be playing the wait and see game. But I think we have to head into the draft with the assumption, okay, it's going to be Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci, which, I want to ask you this question alongside Broncos Country. What level of confidence does that give you in maybe the Broncos offense that needs to take a step further?
It would be a very odd move to me, Cody, to not go with a draft choice among those two guys or in addition to those two guys. I feel like that would be kind of it would be not a sign of disrespect to Broncos Country or anything like that, but it would be a really tough pill to swallow for everybody to say, like, look, we're going to pass on all these options. We're going to punt the QB, like the long-term QB situation, to 2025, where the draft class is not perceived to be better by any means. And we're going to pass on all these quarterbacks. Like, the Broncos did formal interviews with 7 different quarterbacks at the NFL Combine. And you're telling me you didn't like a single one of them, or that even one of those guys that you interviewed, like, wasn't worth a flyer at some point, or even trading down and trying to get him at a later point. Like, that would be surprising to me. Not that the Broncos have to talk themselves into somebody, because we saw how that worked out with Paxton Lynch in 2016. We've seen how that's worked out for other teams that are now trading their former first round quarterbacks or their former, top 100 picks at the quarterback position. I mean, the 2022 NFL draft, those guys are leaving their teams. Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ridder, soon probably Malik Willis as well. 2021 NFL draft. I mean, that draft class, Cody, was perceived to be amazing at the quarterback position with obviously Trevor Lawrence, but then you had Trey Lance, you had Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Mac Jones, all these guys. How many of those guys are still on their original team? And that's kind of crazy to think about, because I remember how much flack the Broncos caught for not taking a quarterback in that particular class. So I'm just saying every year is different and every quarterback is different on an individual case-by-case basis, but it is always buyer beware. So me personally, I wouldn't be overly thrilled about them passing on quarterbacks, but then at the same time, it's like there's the angel and the demon on your shoulder, the one that's saying like, yeah, take a quarterback. Absolutely. You need this quarterback. And the other one that's like, no, just don't worry. Like the 2021 class, 2022, they were terrible, and it's not going to work out no matter what, because it's the Broncos and you're stuck in QB purgatory. I just feel like they need to draft somebody. I really do. I mean, Jarrett Stidham, he has 4 starts in 4 NFL seasons. That would be tough to go into the season without adding to that room.
It's a hard selling point, right? And look, I think, is there a possibility in this world where Jarrett Stidham could suddenly emerge and be the guy? There's a possibility, but the likelihood of that doesn't seem very high at this point when we're talking about probability. We're talking about maybe just arc, trajectory, the career arc for him. For me, I think I agree with you. I think that Denver has to look at a quarterback, and I think we see a lot of commentary here too. And I think this has become a little bit of a groupthink topic. I constantly see it. Well, I don't want Denver to reach for a quarterback. Who says it's reaching, right? Like Sean has already been on the record of saying, I don't care what people think we should do. If we like a guy, we're going to take the guy, right? It doesn't matter what Twitter thinks. It doesn't matter what us in the media, what we think that the Broncos should do. They're not overly concerned about that, which I think would be good. Like if you're concerned about who I want you to take, then I think that's an organizational issue there. But I do think that Denver cannot stand pat, right? This is a situation where, okay, there are a multitude of different quarterbacks in this year's draft. I look at the top 10, top 11, like Denver's picking at 12. They could move up, obviously. But I'm looking at a lot of the teams that have already added a quarterback to their roster from that standpoint. I think everyone's a little bit worried about Minnesota because, yes, they do have Sam Darnold, but now they acquired an additional first-round pick, which they could easily use to swap up to move up into the top 5 if they wanted to. So for me, I look at that. I'm like, okay, like, who does Minnesota want, right? Is it a Drake May? Is it a Bo Nix? Is it a Michael Penix Jr.? Is it Jaden Daniels? We don't know who that is, right? And I don't think anybody but those teams know. But then I think there's this perception, okay, well, if that happens, then Denver's going to have to settle at a quarterback on 12 and reach. I don't know what dignifies it necessarily being a reach outside of the perception of all of us, which we don't know anything about any of these prospects. We don't know how teams feel about them. That has to be factored into the conversation here.
It does, absolutely. And like you mentioned with that Vikings trade, it's not just that, well, there's another team ahead of Denver that could take a quarterback. It's that the Vikings are hearing stuff from around the league that they need to equip themselves to move up to get the guy that they want. Like if they want to get a quarterback, they know they need to have those picks to go get him, especially if they're targeting a specific guy. It could end up being, and I've had this conversation with a number of people, Cody, it could end up being that Sean Payton and the Broncos, they're just so confident their guy's going to be there at 12 that they're not really afraid to have to move up or down. Like you said, they could move up. I mean, they may miss out on a certain number of guys, but like a player like Bo Nix right now, the consensus around him seems to be like there may be a few people who see him as a first-round guy, but most of the NFL draft experts are kind of just like, yeah, he ranks in their 25 to 35 range in terms of the big board. And maybe Sean Payton is kind of just saying like, we're comfortable that a guy like Bo Nix is going to be there and we're just not afraid to take it. We don't care. Screw the consensus opinion. I don't care if he's ranked 35th on your big board. Like he's the guy that we believe we can build an offense around. And if that's the case, you definitely don't screw around with it, do you? You don't be like, well, we're going to trade down and try to accumulate extra picks and get this guy, because then what happens if another team likes him, they jump you at the bottom of round 1. You can't play with fire in this situation. The Broncos are in a place where they kind of have to trade up or stay put if they're going to draft a first-round quarterback.
Well, on top of that, there's some teams out there in the NFL who probably feel a certain way about Sean Payton, his reputation that we all know, and they may try to stick it to him. If they find out, like if there's something that gets out that Denver likes this guy in particular, another team could use that, or teams can use that to try to manipulate the draft order. It's where you have to be really, really careful here in the NFL draft. The Broncos country, what do you think about Denver in the NFL draft this year? How do you feel about Denver maybe rolling with Jarrett Stidham, Ben DiNucci? It's a tough selling point here, but we're also going to throw another scenario out there. What if the Denver Broncos double dip at the QB position in the 2024 NFL draft? What might that look like? You're going to get that much more here in today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. Today's Locked On Broncos podcast is brought to our friends over there at Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar that you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial, LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Could the Denver Broncos get 2 scoops at quarterback in the 2024 NFL Draft? That's something we're going to weigh here on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, following the first week of NFL free agency. How can the Broncos address some of their needs left after the free agency moves that they have made? Quarterback probably being the biggest one there. Sayre, we talked so much about QB, maybe first round, 12th pick overall. There's also an idea that maybe Denver double dips this year at the QB position in this year's NFL Draft, which I find to be interesting because if they go with a QB in round 1, that's the envisioned guy that they want to start, right? And then ideally, if they go with another quarterback, does this mean that they're not fully confident on the first quarterback that they took? Or could this be more of a situation where they might grab another guy that could fit what they want to do offensively, but not necessarily as a starter, but be a backup and could be molded into a guy that maybe could be like the next Chase Daniel, so to speak, a guy who's really grown accustomed to being very system-oriented, and he had a long, durable career because of that. I feel like this is an interesting theory to throw out here on today's episode of the show.
It really is. I know I've seen it thrown out by a number of fans, including people that I kind of chat with outside of just, Twitter, just some direct message stuff. But I saw
Come back, Sean.
Yeah, exactly. Zahn, we need you back. I saw it from Mike Kliss as well, Cody, in his recent piece about the quarterback position, kind of as the dust has been settling of veteran players getting traded or signing with other teams and the Broncos passing on all of them. Mike, he talked about just about every scenario. So I don't want to make it seem like he only said the Broncos are going to go this route, but he suggested the idea of maybe the Broncos like a guy in the first and they like a guy in the fifth. And I took that to mean that maybe they could double up at the position like we're talking about, which is fascinating to me. I know we've seen teams do that in the past, like Washington did it in 2012 with RG3 and obviously Kirk Cousins. And we've seen Kirk Cousins develop into one of the 10 highest paid NFL athletes of all time, which is bizarre. So I think quarterbacks are currency in the NFL. It's the most valuable currency there is. I know that the trade market this offseason hasn't been great, but let's just think about this for a moment. Like the Washington Commanders, they used a 5th round selection on Sam Howell, right? And they're able to parlay that in a trade with Seattle a couple years later into a value of a 4th round pick. There was some, pick swapping going on, but if you look at the trade value chart, basically what the Commanders got in return for Sam Howell is the equivalent of a 4th round draft choice. So they're upgrading in a sense. And I know there's situations like, Mac Jones, Justin Fields, you invest 1st round picks and then some in some of these guys, and you only get a 6th rounder back. But at the same time, I feel like if you're taking a guy in the 4th, 5th round as a second option, that's valuable. 67 quarterbacks played in the NFL last season, Cody. That means that pretty much every team in the NFL, and if you take that number at its face, that's 2 quarterbacks for every team on average, right? And so the reality is that the backups are playing, and they're playing quite a bit, and you need to have guys that are available to you. I know we talked about Stidham and DiNucci, but I wouldn't be opposed that the Broncos come away from this. Maybe they like multiple guys. Maybe that's why they're seemingly so confident sticking with Stidham and DiNucci right now, is because they're looking at the draft and they're like, shoot, we feel like we could get a guy like Nix or Michael Penix or JJ McCarthy at 12. And then we really like this guy down the line. Maybe it's Spencer Rattler in round 3. Maybe it's Joe Milton in round 5 or 6. I don't know what it could be, but I love the idea of doubling up at this particular position.
I think it would be a worthwhile investment. And I think you also have to have maybe in mind here what does it look like for Sean Payton, who's got 4 years left on his career, right? And look, I think the NFL can change. Like if the Broncos just keep losing games and maybe the Broncos move on from Payton after 2 more seasons. Like I don't know what the trajectory is like, but you also have to go into this planning that, hey, even if there's changes to our staff, we have the guy in place that we want, because far too often, I think this offseason has probably been the greatest example of it, considering all the quarterbacks that are out there in the NFL. We've seen head coaching changes and we thought, okay, hey, this guy is going to have an opportunity now. Nope, they shipped that guy off somewhere else. Like they trade him away. So for me, I feel like Denver has to find a way to put into their plan. We're going to have a quarterback plan in place, regardless of who the head coach is, right? We want to see what this guy can do in these next couple of years if you build a system around him. And then if you do have to make a coaching change, can you preserve that system? Can you preserve the philosophy, even if you bring in a new guy? That, I think, is where things are also so hard. Like we talk so much about QB, Sayre, that we don't factor in sometimes in the conversation in the long-term view. Well, what if there's a new coach here on the team? What if the outlook is entirely different? We haven't really seen that in the NFL, so to speak. Now, for Kirk Cousins, he's going to a new situation this year, a new head coach. I'll be very curious to see how they build around him. But I think for guys like Patrick Mahomes, like you think about some of the top quarterbacks in this year, like in the entire NFL, what would Patrick Mahomes be like in a situation without Andy Reid? He'd still be a great quarterback, but what would it look like, though? It'd look entirely different, and you can't build something around just a coach. That's why I think you have to build a system offensively around what a player can do well versus what a coach wants that guy to do or what the coach does really well from a play calling standpoint. That's where I think Denver has to have a long-term plan here in this situation.
And that's why I think what really matters in this evaluation process is what guys kind of blow them away in terms of their understanding of the game, their football IQ, the way that they break things down on the whiteboard. I mean, we've heard some kind of reports, I guess, from the players themselves of how these interviews at the combine went. Like Broncos quarterbacks coach Davis Webb grilling Michael Penix Jr. on some of his worst plays. And maybe the Broncos are doing exactly that, Cody. I know I've seen a lot of debate as this idea of trading for Justin Fields had come up, which didn't happen. Obviously, he went to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but a lot of people saying, well, Justin, if Russell Wilson's not a fit for Sean Payton's offense, then certainly you're not going to want Justin Fields. And I think there's two sides of that coin, right? It's like, well, yes, absolutely. You want to have somebody who can run Sean Payton's offense well, but also, I mean, you may have to take some risks on talent at some point. And that's not to say that you should only go after guys like Fields who are just full of talent and, you almost get a blank canvas to get a start over with a guy like that. But what I'm saying is that I think you do take some risks on talent at some point to say, like, look, this guy he's super talented. He may not be exactly the prototype for this offense, a robotic fit for the scheme. That is exactly what we've been talking about these last handful of years. We were so excited about Payton coming in, being like, hey, he had an offense for Breeze. He had an offense for Taysom Hill, for Jameis Winston, for Teddy Bridgewater, all these different types of quarterbacks that you're able to build around and not have to fit square pegs into the round hole, because Sean Payton is a guy who develops players well and he sets his players up well. The thing about him, Cody, wasn't that it was all about, well, you got to have the exact right guy. Remember, the conversation was, if anyone can fix Russell Wilson, it's Sean Payton. And now the conversation has shifted to, well, Russell Wilson was just a horrible fit for Sean Payton's offense. He needs this type of guy who wants to do these. And I know that there are certain prerequisites and things that Sean Payton's offense that makes it tick. But at the same time, you got to be willing to take risks on guys and their talent as in addition to players who do things like, timing, get the ball out quickly. They avoid taking sacks. They avoid unnecessary, throwaways or interceptions, things like that.
Well, all of this conversation that we've had here today is just going to end up resulting in the Broncos trading for Taysom Hill during the NFL draft, and they're going to pay him $15 million a year to be the quarterback for the next 2 seasons. Watch that happen. That would just be the most on-brand thing I think that would happen here. I think that Denver needs to go with the rookie path, and we want to know, Broncos country, how would you feel? Would you like it if Denver added 2 rookie quarterbacks in this year's draft? One, an envisioned starter, the other one, an envisioned backup. That way you don't have any fall off. As we have seen, as Sayre had pointed out, the number of quarterbacks that have been playing, not only just in 2023, even in 2022, the amount of backup quarterbacks that played then. There is a trend that's happening right now in the NFL, obviously, with the increase in adding another regular season game. Obviously, the contact enforcement, the stuff that you are seeing, we are seeing more quarterback play than we have been, I think, in prior years. An interesting theory to throw out here. And look, Broncos country, now the NFL free agency's kind of quieted down a little bit. Sayre and myself here throughout this entire week on Locked On Broncos, We're going to look at maybe some of the other biggest draft needs the Broncos may have at other positions besides quarterback. We're going to focus on the defensive side of the ball in tomorrow's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. We'll see you then.